Greetings, my friend. Welcome back to the podcast, Teaching That Transforms with Pastor Jimmy Knott. Thank you so much for joining me. Today we begin a new series. I'm really excited about this series of teachings entitled Gigantic Affirmations of Christ, the I AMs of Jesus. Who is Jesus? Depending on who you ask, the answer brings many responses. Confused man, liar, good teacher, Messiah, Son of God, Lord of all, and on and on and on it goes. You know, it mattered to Jesus what others thought of him. I'm reminded about halfway through his public ministry, and he and his disciples end up north of the Sea of Galilee in an area known as Caesarea Philippi. And in Matthew 16:13, now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do men say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah, one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God." So it mattered to Jesus what others thought of him, whether it was the world, as it were, or whether it was those that are his closest followers. And they all had an opinion. But don't you think Jesus' opinion may be the most important of all? Who does he say he is? When we look at these I am sayings of Jesus, and there are 7 of them, and they're all recorded in the Gospel of John, because John's sole purpose in writing his letter was to prove the deity of Jesus, that Jesus Christ is indeed the one and only God. That was his message. And Jesus, in these 7 I am sayings, makes clear his identity, that he is God, and his mission. His mission as the bread of life, his mission as light, his mission as the door, his mission as our good shepherd, his mission as the resurrection and life, his mission as the way, the truth, and the life, and his mission as the vine, and we are the branches. Jesus says, I am. That phrase, I am, goes all the way back into the Old Testament, early into the life of the Jewish people. They were in captivity in Egypt for hundreds of years, and God was raising up a leader in Moses to lead his people out of captivity and into the land to which he had promised them. When God called Moses at the burning bush in Exodus chapter 3 and told him that he was going to be the deliverer of his people, then Moses said to God, "If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am." And he said, "Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you." His name represents his authority. I am Jehovah. I am that I am. I am eternally self-existent. I am eternally unchangeable. I am eternally present. I am eternally faithful and true. These I am sayings help us to understand from the very lips of Jesus who he is, his identity, and what his mission is in coming into our world. In John chapter 6, we have the first recorded of these I am sayings. And let me read a few of the verses here to kind of set a little bit of context. A little bit prior to this experience, Jesus had fed 5,000 people miraculously north of the Sea of Galilee. He had met their physical need for food. And he makes his way to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and they come looking for him because they really didn't want to accept him for who he was. They really wanted him to provide another meal yet for them. And in John 6:25, when they found Jesus on the other side of the sea, they said to him, "Teacher, where did you come from? When did you come here?" Jesus answered, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you seek me, not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. Do not labor for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you, for on him has God the Father set his seal, or has certified him." Then they said to him, "What must we do to be doing the works of God?" Jesus answered, This is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent. So they said to him, then what sign do you do that we may see and believe you? What work do you perform? Our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. Excuse me. Then Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses who gave you bread from heaven. My Father in heaven gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is that which comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. Who comes to me, all who come to me will not hunger, and who believes in me will never thirst. And then further down, again, Jesus says, I am the living bread. And again he says, I am the bread of life. You know, bread was different in that culture and in those days than it is today. Bread was the most important part of the meal in Jesus' day. In our culture, we go to the restaurant and we generally focus on ordering our entree and usually bring out a basket of bread and put it on the table. But the bread is usually secondary. But in Jesus' day, the bread was primary and the meat was simply a side dish. Bread was accessible and available to everyone, even to the poor, though they usually used barley to make their bread while the more wealthy folks used wheat. But bread was the very staple of the meal. It was the most important part of the meal. So when Jesus is saying, identifying himself as the bread of life, he was really speaking to what they would understand. You could summarize the message of the entire chapter in this way. Here was the simple message. People need food. People need bread. Not just for physical life. They need spiritual food and spiritual bread for their souls. Next, God has sent the food. God has provided the bread, and that food and that bread is in Jesus. And then third, we must receive this bread for ourselves. Let's walk through this fascinating narrative and story and look at what Jesus was saying to us when he says, I am the bread of life. Where did this bread come from? 8 times in the passage, not once, not twice, but 8 times in the passage, Jesus said that I am the bread sent down from heaven. God sent down this bread from heaven. That's exactly what God did in sending his Son. That's exactly what God did. You see, when he's talking about the bread of heaven here, it goes all the way back into the wilderness wanderings after God's people have been delivered by Moses, and they're making their way toward the promised land. After they had crossed miraculously through the Red Sea and made their way into the promised land, the people began to murmur and to complain. They said that they felt like they'd be better off in slavery in Egypt. At least they had something there to eat, and they were hungry. So they really murmured against Moses and against God. And God heard their murmurings, and God said, okay, I will provide for you food. I'll provide quail, meat at night, and then I will provide bread for in the morning. And they woke up every morning, and God would supply the bread for the day. That's where the background of the manna comes from. But Jesus was so different in so many ways from the manna. But he was sent from God, just as God sent that manna to people, to his people in the Old Testament. God sent his Son Jesus. In the beginning of the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Jesus is this bread, like that manna in the wilderness. It's easily available. We need it daily, and it requires us to have it in order to maintain our physical and, in this case, our spiritual lives. And Jesus said, I am the true bread, as opposed, as it were, to the false bread. It's not that the manna was false, but it was for the physical needs only. But Jesus Christ is the true bread. He is the bread for the soul, not for the body. He is the bread that meets our spiritual and deepest needs and not just the physical needs. He is the bread for everyone and not just for the nation of Israel. He is the bread that not just gives physical life, but eternal life forever. He is the bread that doesn't just prolong our physical lives, but gives us eternal life forever. Jesus said in this passage, I am the living bread. What does he mean by that? He means that when we come into a relationship with him, he gives us life. He takes us that are spiritually dead and separated from him, and he gives us spiritual life and life in him. There are two words for life in the New Testament. One is bios, and it means physical life or physical existence, which everyone has. But in the passage here, Jesus' word for life is not just about physical existence. It's not bios, it's zoe. And it refers to spiritual life. It refers to the life of God in the soul of human beings. Jesus said, I come to give you life, life in your very soul. At least 9 times in this passage does it say he gives life. He gives eternal life. He gives life forever, over and over and over again. This is all about the bread gives life. It supplies life. It sustains our life. It satisfies our life more than anyone or anything could possibly do in our relationship with Jesus. So here's the real message in this first I am saying. He came down from heaven. At least 10 times in this passage in John chapter 6, he came down from heaven, sent from God to give you and me real, abundant, full life. So how do we make this bread of life our own? Well, if you were sitting at Olive Garden, they put those warm breadsticks in front of you. What must you do to take the breadsticks? You must reach out. You must take those garlic-soaked breadsticks, and you must open your mouth, and you must bite down, and you must take a bite, and you must chew the bread. You must take the bread for yourself. You must consume it, and you must eat it. And that's what we must do with Jesus. And you say, well, how do we do that? We do that by what he talked about in the passage several times. Believe, believe, believe. We must trust him. This bread is available. It says in a passage, it's available. It's available to the world. It's available to anyone. It's available to everyone. It's available to whoever. It's available to you. No one is excluded. It is accessible and available to us. And it has come down from heaven for us. But we must choose on our own to consume and take the bread into our lives. So today, let me ask you, have you taken into your life the bread of life? Have you received Christ into your life? And if you have, are you still feeding on this bread of life to sustain and to satisfy your soul's basic desires for living and for life? Jesus said, I am the bread of life. So let's feed on him today. He has come. God has sent him down from heaven. He sent him to us to give us life, life more abundantly and more fulfilling. Thank you for listening today. This is going to be an exciting study on the I am sayings of Jesus. Thanks for listening to Truth That Transforms. And remember, it only transforms us when we apply it. Blessings from Pastor Jimmy. I'll see you next time.